Hello everyone and welcome back to our Learning Hub series. Today's video is going to be all about how you can reduce your sugar intake. Research has shown that in Scotland, both adults and children consume high amounts of sugar in their diet. The Scottish dietary goals set out by the Scottish Government recommend that people in Scotland reduce their sugar intake in order to reduce the risk of diet-related diseases. Studies have shown that eating and drinking sugar is one of the main risk factors for tooth decay. However, your risk of tooth decay will depend on the amount of sugars in your diet and the frequency that you consume them. Some research has shown that sugars could play a role in the development of type 2 diabetes and obesity. These are a couple of reasons why reducing our sugar intake could be beneficial for our health. However, it is important to mention that not all sugars increase the risk of tooth decay, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, so let's have a look at this in more detail. The recommendations for reducing sugar intake refer to a particular group of sugars called free sugars. Free sugars are the sugars added to food and drinks, such as those found in fizzy drinks, cakes, cereal, or even tinned products such as soups and sauces. It also includes the sugars present in honey and syrups, as well as fruit juices and purees. However, free sugars do not include the sugars found naturally in whole fruit, vegetables, and milk. This means that the sugar recommendations, which we will highlight in this video, do not include the sugars found in these foods and drinks. So now that we know what free sugars are and why we should reduce them in our diet, let's have a look at the amount of free sugars we should be consuming. In the UK, it is recommended that adults consume no more than 30 grams of free sugars per day, and that is the equivalent of only 7 sugar cubes. This recommendation of no more than 30 grams of free sugars per day is also the same for older children aged 11 to 18 years. To put this recommendation into some context, one 330 milliliter can of regular Coca-Cola contains 35 grams of sugar, which is the equivalent of nearly 9 sugar cubes. This means that consuming one regular can of Coca-Cola would put you over the daily recommended limit for free sugars. So if you can imagine, in one full day of eating and drinking, it would be very easy to consume above the recommended guidelines for free sugar intake. Okay, so what are the guidelines for younger children then? Well, compared to adults and teenagers, they have a lower recommended daily free sugar intake. For children aged 4 to 6 years, it is recommended that they consume no more than 19 grams of free sugars per day, which is the equivalent of 5 sugar cubes. And for children aged 7 to 10 years, this recommendation is 24 grams of free sugars per day, which is the equivalent of 6 sugar cubes. And again, to put this into context, if a child aged between 7 and 10 were to have one of these Oats and Honey Nature Valley bars, it would amount to half of their recommended free sugar intake for the day. From these examples, it might seem almost impossible to meet the free sugar intake recommendations. We hope that our tips over the next few slides will give you some ideas on how you can reduce your sugar intake. So let's move on to our first tip. Having an awareness and understanding of food labels is a great tool for reducing our sugar intake. If you're not too confident on how to interpret food labels, our previous Learning Hub video was all about this. So I highly recommend watching this video if you haven't already seen it. I will put a link to the video in the description below so you can check this out once the video is done. Choosing foods and drinks which are low in sugar is one way to reduce your overall free sugar intake. Foods that are low in sugar have 5 grams of sugar or less per 100 grams of the product, whereas drinks that are low in sugar have 2.5 grams or less per 100 mils of the product. You can usually find the amount of sugars present in a food or drink product per 100 grams or per 100 mils on the back of packed food label. Sometimes food products have what is called a traffic light label, which shows whether a product is high, medium, or low in sugar. So alternatively, you can look out for products with a green sugar label, as shown here, which signals that a product is low in sugar. Another way to look at it is to limit the amount of food and drinks you consume that are high in sugar. On a traffic light label, this would be signaled by a red sugar label. Or alternatively, you can check the amount of sugar there is per 100 grams or per portion. If a food product has more than 22.5 grams of sugar per 100 grams, or has more than 27 grams of sugar per portion, it is classed as high in sugar. For a drink, it is high in sugar if it has more than 11.25 grams of sugar per 100 mils, or 13.5 grams of sugar per portion. This is a really simple way to check if something is high in sugar, which is useful when trying to reduce your sugar intake. We can also reduce our sugar intake by making conscious food swaps when we go shopping. Using breakfast cereal as an example, we can swap these high sugar breakfast cereals for lower sugar alternatives. These are just some of the examples of breakfast cereals that are much lower in sugar compared to the ones that were in the previous slide. Using food labels to make conscious food and drink swaps to lower sugar alternatives can have a big impact on our free sugar intake. Instead of opting for lower sugar breakfast cereals, you might enjoy changing up the type of breakfast you eat. Some low sugar breakfast options that we love include omelets, eggs on toast, and unsweetened porridge with fruit. Okay, so in the beginning we found out that 1 can of Coca-Cola can put us over our recommended daily intake of free sugar. But this isn't the only drink that contains lots of sugar. In fact, a lot of sugar-sweetened drinks are very high in sugar. Take this Monster Energy drink as an example. One 500 milliliter can of this contains 55 grams of sugar. That is the equivalent of almost 14 sugar cubes. That is almost double the recommended daily intake of free sugars for an adult or a teenager. Even though not all sugary drinks contain this amount of sugar, in general, it is a good idea to try and limit the amount of sugary drinks that you consume in order to reduce your free sugar intake. Instead, you can try switching out these drinks for water or sugar-free alternatives. Another way to reduce your free sugar intake is to be aware of hidden sugars. These are sugars added to products which most people assume don't contain sugar. This is often done to enhance the flavor of processed foods, and this even includes savory foods. For example, you may not have expected this bolognese sauce to contain any added sugar, but if you look at the ingredients list, sugar is the 3rd ingredient. So if you're trying to reduce your sugar intake, it's important to be cautious of added sugars in less obvious foods like this sauce here. Cooking from scratch is a really great way to limit the amount of free sugars in your diet. Instead of using pre-made sauces which might contain added sugars, we can make a sauce or a meal from basic ingredients and flavor it to our liking with garlic, herbs, and spices. This means that we can limit the addition of free sugars altogether. And for our last point, we are sharing some of our favorite snacks that are low in free sugars. These are fruit, nuts and seeds, nut butter on toast, rice cakes and oat cakes, which are great with a low sugar spread or hummus, veg sticks and dip like hummus, salsa or guacamole, lightly salted popcorn, a boiled egg, and a plain yogurt with fruit. Swapping some of your high sugar snacks for one of these will help reduce your overall free sugar intake. What we would recommend is to choose the tips that you feel are the most attainable and start with them. Just remember that you can always come back to this video later on when you need more inspiration. Don't forget to check us out on our other social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We also have a website full of free nutrition resources and recipes, so head over to nutritionscotland.org to check these out. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more Learning Hub videos.